Hey everyone, welcome to Nerd Talk. I'm Mike.
And I'm Chris.
And today we're doing a review on Shang-Chi, the new Marvel movie from Phase 4. Is it Phase 5 now? Phase 4?
I think it's still Phase 4. It's hard to tell.
Yeah, with the crazy COVID and all the delays and stuff.
Yeah.
It's been a long time coming, but we saw it. It was awesome. And we're going to jump in and kind of give you a recap and review of the movie. Now, don't worry, we won't hit spoilers right off the bat. We'll give you a warning before we jump into the movie spoilers. But with that being said, Shang-Chi basically starts much earlier in the timeline, and then we kind of get caught up to present day. But with that being said, what did you think of Shang-Chi?
Yeah, I thought it was good. It was nice to be back in the theaters again, which was awesome. Mm-hmm. Quite the experience. Not a character I knew a lot about beforehand, just very little. Did a little bit of research when they announced that they were going to film this movie. I thought the acting was very well done, and the cast was well picked. So I enjoyed that. You know, there's enough action scene and a good storyline. So I enjoyed it overall. Not one of my top Marvel movies, but you know, everyone has their favorites for different reasons and who they followed or who they know more or who they like more. So, but very, very enjoyable movie, and I would suggest watching it for sure.
Yeah, it was enjoyable. I definitely like kind of getting back into the swing of things of Marvel. It's an origin story. You know, it's not just about Shang-Chi's origin, but it's also about the 10 rings. So the title is Shang-Chi on the 10 rings, and it's about what are the 10 rings, what do they symbolize, and it kind of picks up from where we left off with Iron Man 3 and the Mandarin, yeah. And then at the very end, there's that's the bonus scene, or it was a short, I think, that was called something about the king. Here Comes the King or something like that, right? And it was Ben Kingsley, and basically the real Mandarin essentially approaches him, and it's about the 10 rings, and it's this organization, and you know the Mandarin is real, and Ben Kingsley was basically paid to portray this figure. So the movie kind of falls into that and kind of ties up loose ends with what happened with Iron Man 3 and kind of moves on with that. So it's interesting to see that this is this organization or this character. You know, how far we've kind of come with the Marvel timeline and stuff like that. So it's interesting. I enjoyed it. I thought that what they decided to, how they kind of decided to portray the 10 rings was a little different than what I read about, you know, from the comics and kind of what they, you know, how it was represented there. Yeah. So that was a little bit disappointing. I was hoping that we kind of get a little bit more on that backstory and kind of what they're about. But they don't delve too much into that in this film. And what they do show, while it was cool, I kind of felt like, again, it could have been a little better than what we saw.
I agree with that, yeah. I was disappointed by how they used the 10 rings and I was expecting more. We'll get into it more when the spoilers come, but yeah, I was a little disappointed by it.
Yeah, I definitely recommend you see it. We definitely want to be supporting Marvel in these movies, especially as we hear what's to come in Phase 5 with a lot of these new up-and-coming movies heroes and stuff. Yeah. So we definitely want them to keep going. And, you know, with Black Widow kind of going straight to Disney+, you know, getting the money and getting out there is going to help now. And, you know, we know Disney's not hurting for money, but the actors and stuff like that who made these movies, and it is a good movie on its own merit. So I definitely recommend it a watch. Yeah. Go check it out in the theaters. Yeah. All right, so with that, we'll jump into the spoiler-heavy section. So if you haven't watched the movie, you want to stop here, watch the movie, then come back, and we'll kind of fill in kind of what happens and things that we liked and didn't like. So you've been fair warned at this point. So Shang-Chi, we start with a little bit of a history lesson, right?
Yeah.
It kind of talks about like so many years ago kind of thing, and we have this figurehead, and does it initially talk about that he just found the rings? Like, how does it?
So they said it pretty much opens up with the battle scene from back in the day, and it says there's a rumor that's been going on for thousands of years. That's right.
Someone's narrating.
It always changes from story to story.
That's right.
But it always involves one man and these 10 rings, and you know, some of the stories say that he stole it from a tomb, and some stories say he won it from a god or whatever it may be. So you know, it's kind of a myth and legend. But then they show him coming by himself and starting the battle against all these other members. You know, they shoot arrows. He kind of uses the rings to do a force field and destroy all the arrows. And then he starts attacking. And then he blows the doors open, and the rest of his 10-ring army come to continue the battle.
Yeah, and basically he's been here for thousands of years. He's been through multiple wars over the centuries, and his goal
is to get more power and power, like take over countries, land, money. You know, he's just power hungry, and he just wants to conquer everything in his path.
Yeah, they didn't explain, unless I missed it completely, why he wasn't involved in the Thanos fight.
No,
right?
They didn't show or talk about that.
And we did see that he was, you know, after conquering different lands and looking at myths and legends, as it gets to present day, he finds this myth of this town that has this power of the gods, like this ancient.
So I think it said 1996. He was looking at this powerful creatures live in this land and magic, and so he wants to now conquer that because he's pretty much done everything around his region and world, that he wants to go into the more magical realms and discover this.
That's right. Or was it 91?
This region.
I think it was 91.
It could have been somewhere in the 90s.
Yeah, and so he's like, they're like, oh yeah, we can send some scouts and do research. He goes, no, I want to go now. Like, I'm just going to go.
Yeah.
And so they head off to go in a car, and then as they're driving through, the guy looks behind them and notices that the forest
is moving.
This bamboo forest is like moving and shifting and closing behind them. And so as they do their best to like get through it, the car gets crushed, essentially knocked out by this bamboo thing,
thrown off a cliff.
But he manages to get out and survive with the rings, and then makes his way into, I guess, the entrance of it, this secluded area where there's this woman there.
Yeah.
And so she kind of talks to him and basically tells him he can't come any closer, he's not allowed in, and all this stuff. And so then they basically get into this fight, but it looks
kind of like Hidden Dragon, like the Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon kind of. You know, the girl's kind of floating around using the myth, you know, the nature, mythic, and wind, and so on to battle against him, and she essentially defeats him in battle.
Yeah, no matter what he comes at her, she always has a counter move, and is the only one who's been successfully able to subdue him. Excuse me.
Yeah.
And it's funny because it's a cool fight scene, but it makes you wonder, like, okay, these 10 rings are supposed to be ultra powerful. And again, with the comics, they're all supposed to have different elements. Each ring is different in terms of what power it gives you. One controls wind, one controls fire,
light, dark, and
life and souls and all these different things.
Reality and different things.
Yeah, and then in this movie, it's just magical rings that shoot energy out, essentially, like a blue energy. He can shoot them to cause like fireballs, I guess, if you want to call them energy balls, and it can use them to deflect and block. But they're pretty much like chakrams, like you're just throwing out rings and hitting people, and I'm like, what's the point of this? Like, I just like it's cool effects, but I'm like, why is he not using the other elements? Like, what's happening here? And I thought, okay, maybe because he found these rings, he doesn't know the true potential, and maybe this martial arts that teaches elements will help him unlock the rest. So I'm like, okay, I'll keep quiet as we see the movie progresses. And so as they're fighting, you can see them like locking eyes, and they don't look very angry at each other.
Yeah, they're kind of smirking and smiling,
and they're enjoying
with
battle.
Each other. Yeah.
And so it's basically like a mating dance, if you will. And so they fall in love, and so the woman wants to bring him into the village, and of course the village leader doesn't allow it, says that he is not deserving, and
his past is tainted. He's killed a lot of people, done bad things. So, and this magical area is kind of pure and untapped that way.
So she leaves everything to go live with him, and so they leave to get married and to have a life. And so she agrees to like leave her past behind, and he agrees to lock his rings away in the chest and not use the rings anymore.
That's right. So they both don't have powers anymore.
Yeah, they both leave their past behind in order to pursue. They're both sacrificing something to be with each other, and so then they get married. They have kids, and we kind of see that, and then that's pretty much all we see at this point in time. And then we kind of get caught up to
present day.
We see the baby being born, and she's holding the baby, whatever, and then it kind of zooms into like present day, and we see Shang-Chi at this point. Sean,
his name is Sean in the U.S.
And in present day he is a valet
driver. Yes, indeed. So we see him wake up. He starts to do some workout, and then he gets dressed into this. We think he's getting into his business suit. A nice car pulls up. A gentleman pops out with the suit on, throws the keys, and it's Shang-Chi that catches it, Sean. So this is how we meet him and the Awkwafina's character as well, who is his best friend, who he's known for 10 plus years since coming to America.
Yes, we know he left and came to America. We don't know why, and that gets filled in as the movie progresses. But it's. I mean, we can jump into it now. We don't have to go to every plot point. But basically, in a nutshell, his father trains him. His mother dies.
Yes.
Some people from his father's past want to seek revenge come to their house. The father is gone, I guess, fishing or something, and so the mother's there speaking with the son, I guess, showing him some of their moves.
Yes.
And she explains that she doesn't have her power anymore, but you know.
So her past is a dragon. Like they have the dragon
Yes.
soul inside them. You know, dragon scale armor, things like that from her homeland.
Mm-hmm.
So that this is in him as well, and she's teaching him the techniques and movements without him really knowing. It's kind of like
It gets in you, you
meditation,
feel it.
and like yoga and breathing and everything like that, and technique in that regard.
Mm-hmm.
But so we find out that they also have a daughter during this time.
Yes.
So is Shang-Chi and the daughter, which I don't remember her
Yuriko?
name. Yeah, that sounds about right.
Something like that. Yeah.
So those two are they're training with the mother, and this is when the other Iron Group or some other gang comes and seeks revenge because in the past their father had used the 10 rings against them and taken them down.
Yep.
So now they've come and she explains that
he's a different man. He's changed. He's not the same person anymore.
And the kids aren't involved in this.
So they said, okay, let the kids go. So she tells the kids to go inside, which they do. The boy stands at the door and watches, and so she basically has to face them. And then more men come.
Yeah.
As she threatens them, like leave, or just your last chance. And then like 30, 40 more men come, and then she basically, you hear like fighting and screaming and stuff, and then you see the father get home, and then he looks and you see all the men like destroyed on the floor, knocked out, but his wife is also on the floor, and the son's over her, and is basically like she's dead. Her mother, like she used all of her energy to save her kids, and it cost her life. And so the father was very angry at what happened, and she's like, this wouldn't have happened if I didn't get rid of the rings. So he goes and he puts on the rings, and he wants revenge. So he takes the boy with him. He goes down to where their hideout is, and the boy kind of points out like that. That's the guy.
Kind of confirms identity of these are the people that came.
Yep, and he explains to him before he goes out, like, blood for blood. Blood for pay for blood or something like that. Yeah. And will you help me, like, revenge your mother kind of thing? And so the son's like, yes. And so they go off. He points at the guy. He destroys everyone. Then he comes back to the son, and he says something else to him.
I think that's when he says.
That's when he says.
Yeah, blood is paid with blood. And then he asks if he'll help him.
Yeah, so then they go back. He starts the kids training. He gets trained. He's very ruthlessly trained where, like, they explain, like, no weapon can kill him. No one can hurt him. He's, like, getting
in the preview, they show the pillar where, he has a fist mark. He's got to hit it. His hands are bleeding. If he stops, he gets whipped in the back by, the main right-hand man, I guess, to the father.
But is it a man or a woman? I never.
You know what? I'm not too sure about that.
Because it feels like a woman, but then you see they're all training men, so I assume it's a man.
I believe it's a man. I think they said he has the.
Yeah.
So they have two necklaces that were or pendants that were given to their mother.
Yeah.
And she told them that if they ever get lost, this will lead them home.
That's right.
And that's all we know about them so far.
Yeah, and so we see the training of Shang-Chi and how he's grown up, basically become this killer, this assassin, in the steps of the father. And the daughter was not allowed to train because she was a girl. So we find out again through backstory that she watched them and taught herself to be even better. So she's self-taught everything that the brother knew. So anyway, that comes into a little bit later in the movie. But anyway, so long story short, Shang-Chi gets chained. And the father then he says, I know where the killer is.
He's 14 years old.
Yeah, he wants to send him off to go kill the guy who killed your mom. Like, this is your final test to kind of be with me and be ready to take on the burden of the rings and all that kind of stuff. Like, this is your final test kind of thing. So,
we find this out actually
much later in the movie.
Yeah, so he gets put on a bus. I guess to go on the bus to go to work. And all of a sudden, he's attacked on the bus.
After work, isn't it?
Yeah.
Or... No, it is on the way to work because it's the next day because they have food.
So they went to breakfast. Met Aquafina. Is it Aquafina?
That's her real name.
Yeah,
that's not her.
No, not name. The character name. I think it's Katie, the character's name. So Katie, they're close friends. He comes for breakfast with Katie's family, and then they go off to work. And this is where he's kind of attacked or confronted.
On the bus,
yeah. And Katie's like, you have the wrong guy, and this guy's talking.
This is the guy who runs away from fights, and that's why we became best friends.
But the assailant is telling him, I want the pendant. Mm-hmm. So, all of a sudden he kicks in and starts, battling these assailants on the bus, and you know, it kind of takes everyone by surprise. And there's a funny part where there's a kind of a blogger or live blogger. He says, "Hey guys, you know, coming for me on the bus. This guy, I'm gonna rate the. I had a little bit of martial arts training when I was younger. I'm gonna rate the fight as it goes on." So that was kind of I laughed at that. So.
Yeah. Some levity. They had some good moments of levity with Katie and with some other characters throughout the movie, and just some comments, and it was nice. It wasn't like in your face, knocked over the head with it, but it was well done throughout. That it kind of brought some joy into the crazy action that we got to see, and it was enjoyable.
Yeah. So anyway, he you know, battles all these people. This is where the guy with the cut off arm, where the sword comes out, attacks him as well. There's a huge battle scene. The bus is cut in half. But at the end of it, he comes out of the bus and his pendant's gone, and the assailant with the sword arm walks away and gets into a car with it in his hand. So pretty much his father is sending goons to come get the pendants from him and his sister. So
because then he decides he wants to go visit his sister because he got a
postcard with her address, and kind of to meet with the dragon on the front. So
which is in Macau.
Yeah, so he goes back to Macau and you know, goes to the address and is looking for his sister, but finds out it's an underground fight club kind of thing for like superheroes and, you know, people with powers and so on. So,
and as he's ushering through, we get to see Wong and Abomination
in the main ring. So that was a little interesting. I didn't get why Wong and Abomination would be. And it's kind of a stage fight too.
Yeah, because then he was talking to him afterwards, like, but isn't he like the big bad guy? He wants to kill Hulk. He's the bad guy who wants to kill everyone, kind of thing. And yet he seems like, okay, good job. Like, you got to do, like, what's the buddy situation here? He seems like a villain, or he's always been thought to me as a villain. So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, and at the end of that battle, later on, we kind of see Wong create a portal to bring Abomination back.
Yeah,
and it looked like a cage similar to the one that was in the helicarrier for the Hulk.
So you think it was a raft?
I figured like he's bringing him back and forth from the raft.
See, but this is the thing. So with the raft, which we haven't officially seen, I don't think, in Marvel movies, have we? I mean, I guess at the end of Civil War, we get to see them in there. Yeah. But it's supposed to be like that, at least in the comics, in the shows that I've watched, the raft subdues powers. So you can't just use your powers in there, unless I'm not understanding that right. Now, I know they have special cuffs and stuff that they have on the villains at all times, but I thought the actual building was built in such a way that it's supposed to, like, withstand like magic and powers and stuff. It's more stronger than your average jail cell.
I'm not sure about that, but I know that it has powers to not be found and things like that, and kind of cloaked that way. But I'm not sure about the magical powers inside unless they have the restraining things. Okay. But it seems like they're doing a side hustle to get some money and
why would Wong be part of that? Like Wong is all like, especially with Doctor Strange, like don't do this, follow the rules. Like it just seems really weird unless someone is portraying Wong, which I don't think it is.
No, I think
at the end of the movie it's the real Wong, but it's interesting, and I wonder if it's to set up something. I don't think it was just there for a laugh. Maybe it's to set up something down the road.
Yeah, I mean there is a She-Hulk show coming out, and I believe the Abomination character,
I wouldn't be surprised,
is going to be in that. And I think later on down the road, the captain who is usually in Iron Man and Hulk and everything.
Oh, the guy who becomes Red Hulk.
Yeah, creates a team of like anti-hero kind of things as well. So I may be wrong, but I think Thunderbolts or something like that they were called, or I'm not too sure, but that might be kind of bringing up into She-Hulk, which we'll bring up at the end as well for the end credit.
Yeah. So they do this awesome fight scene. They get away with the pendant. They decide to go to the fight club. They're there. On the way up to the elevator, he signs some document which he thinks is access, but he's basically agreeing to participate in a fight. As he gets in there, they saw his video
that was
and how many likes.
Yeah,
and so they want him to fight this champion or whatever, and so he has no idea who it is, and so Awkwafina's Katie basically says, like let's do it. We need the money. You know,
what's their cut and everything like that. He's like, it doesn't matter. She's like, it does matter. Like,
let's do this. Make some quick money. It's easy for you. All of a sudden, she's like, you can fight. You got this. You're all good. She's very, very fast talking, very funny. Reminds me a little bit of like a Vince Vaughn style character in the terms of like just the crazy liners and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And so they get into the ring. His shirt's off. She's like, "Where's your shirt?" He's like they wanted me to take my shirt off.
Yeah.
And who walks into the ring? But it's his sister, and he has to fight his sister. Yeah. And of course, he doesn't want to fight her. Wants to hold back, but she's like knocking him out.
She's very good,
and she's basically taking some revenge. And we find out after the fight is done, which she basically wins.
Yeah.
They kind of go out and they have a conversation that he promised to come back.
After his
mission, and she waited there for days to weeks to months to years.
After 6 years.
And after 6 years, she realized that he wasn't coming back, and she didn't need him anymore. And she figured out she escaped and made this as her life. Like, this is her empire.
Yeah.
And so she did that, and she's kind of gone on without him, and she, like, resents him for it. And so, and so they basically see some guys break in, and he's telling her that the people are after her pendant, and that they're gonna have to leave. And then they see
we find out that she didn't actually send him the postcard.
That's right.
And that it was, I guess, their father.
Her father.
And that we find out that their father always knew where they were, and that they gave Shang-Chi 10 years. He said, I gave you 10 years to live your life, and now it's time for you to join my side.
Yeah. So it was an interesting turn of events. So the place comes, a bunch of his ninjas kind of show up, and so his sister and her partner kind of like leave through a secret door, and so Katie and Sean are left to like figure a way out. So they decide to go out the window, which is all like half built with like bamboo, very Rush Hour, like tons of bamboo built up on the side of the building. And so he says, this is the way we're gonna have to go. Like, do you trust me? And so they're going out to the window, and then of course the ninjas kind of come out, and so he says, I'm going to distract them, you keep going. So this crazy another fight scene happens with the bamboo and all this kind of stuff. Really cool.
The sister comes back to help
because Katie gets knocked off.
Yeah,
she's holding on for her life. The bamboo snaps, she falls down. Sister saves her, and she goes back and decides to help them fight. And this is kind of where they kind of get over the situation and kind of go on together. And during this fight, she also loses her pendant.
So the right hand man in the mask ends up getting the pendant from her. It takes off really quickly. Shang-Chi chases after her. Then they have a one-on-one battle because he was one of the ones that trained him a lot and would always beat him, and so he kind of resented that. So he was about to do the final strike, but then we see one of the 10 rings kind of wrap around and pull him away, and
his father
then we see his father appear with the 2 pendants and
has everyone else in custody, has Katie and his sister, everyone there. And so they all head back to father's home, and we have conversations that he talks about, it's time, and you guys have been gone a while, and there's a reason that you're back. And long story short, he hears the mother's voice. He believes that she's still alive and that she's being held hostage
by her
in her village. And so they need to find a way to get in the village. And so they're like, this is all ridiculous. This doesn't make sense. There's all stories and whatnot. And so they think he's gone crazy, that she's dead. And so he then takes him into a room with the 2 pendants, puts him in a dragon statue, ends up being the dragon's eyes, and out comes this water, this mystical water that like floats and stuff, and then ends up making a map on the floor.
It shows the forest and how it opens up at certain times and the direction that you go.
Yeah, and so now they realize that there's a way to get there, and basically...
And a time, so 3 days at midday is when the path opens up for them. Yeah,
and so Sean pretty much says like, no, you're crazy, we're not doing this, whatever. And so he says, like, I had a feeling that you wouldn't want to do this. So he puts him in his prison, sends him down, him, Yuriko, and Katie as well. They all kind of go down to this prison, and as they get into the cells, they hear some ramblings. Some noises, and so they're talking, and then he's like, wait, you're gonna go towards that sound? And it sounds like some roaring or some grumbling. So he heads out, and in this cage, in this jail cell, ends up being Ben Kingsley's character, the fake Mandarin.
actor.
And so he's there, and he talks about like how he was paid to portray his father. Because his father does talk about having many names in the past. One is the Mandarin, one is the
Emperor, Destroyer of worlds.
And so he is essentially the Mandarin. That's just one of many names that he's been called over the years. And so Ben Kingsley was paid to portray this character for a group he didn't realize was a terrorist group. And then he didn't realize until it was too late that he was doing terrorist acts and yada, 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 and whatever. And so the Mandarin basically came and fetched him. And then somehow, I guess he
was going to kill him, but I guess he did some acting and put on a great show, and they keep him as
like a court jester. They decided to keep him alive for whatever reason. Okay, that's his story, and that's why they kept him alive. That's for this guy who's like a conquering killer. You wouldn't think that he'd keep someone alive who, like, I don't know, it just seemed kind of a stretch, but it was what it was. It was a throwaway, like, okay, whatever, I'll believe it, let's move on. There's also some weird creature that's in there that is proof of this magical land existing. It's this faceless little fuzzy character with 4 wings.
And they do kind of laugh, because a laughing point, because Ben Kingsley's character, the fake Mandarin we'll call him, Shang-Chi and his sister kind of, or two of them are like, what is
Katie,
that?
because you're Katie,
Katie, that's right.
Yeah.
And Katie's like, what is that? And he's like, oh, it's real. Like he thought it was a figment of his imagination.
Yeah, you can see
like,
him too. Great. I thought it was going nuts. And then he starts talking to it and says, you can understand it. He says, I've been here for years. Like I just learned how to communicate with it or whatever. Yeah. And so that's that whole setup is for this purpose. This is basically their key on how they're going to find a way into this magical realm, because this monster knows how to get there. He has a 90% sure that he can get them through, and so they decide to leave right away, but they can't figure out how to get out. And then Yuriko breaks through the wall and says, there's an underground tunnel system. How do you think I escaped last time?
The first time.
This is how we get out. So it makes sense. Like, okay, she got out the first time, so that's why she would be the one who knows how to sneak them out the second time. Makes sense. Like, I find that with a lot of issues that have happened in Star Wars and other big properties, Marvel makes sure to whatever situations they come up on, there's a reason for it. It makes sense. They're trying to make it as realistic as possible, but then there are certain things that are a little bit of a stretch, like Kingsley being alive.
And that is what it is. And knowing how to automatically understand
it. He figured it out. But the reason why that happened is because they need him to translate on how to get through this forest. So they all go into they get down to the
underground garage kind of thing.
The cars are, and they found this one called Razor Fist, this car. So they get into it, drive it off. Do the other enemies know that they're on their way? Because isn't there a battle as they're driving out?
Yeah, so they kind of see him on camera, and it's the guy with the sword arms car, and he's like, that's my car. And so he sends a bunch of people down to try and get him. So there's one way that's an easy way to exit, and the other way needs a fingerprint to get out. So, they have an ensuing battle in a vehicle where Shang-Chi and his sister in the back seat, Katie's driving, and Ben Kingsley's in the passenger seat with the creature. So they have this battle. There's two motorcycles. There's a vehicle. They knock down one of the motorcycle drivers. It kind of takes out the vehicle. They take out the other motorcycle driver, but pull him in or try and knock him out. They're getting really close to the gate. They need his fingerprint. They eventually knock him out, get his fingerprint on in time, and the gate opens, and then they push the close button, and it closes. I guess that's how they get rid of the vehicle.
Yeah, actually. They smash
the vehicle down.
So then they're out. They head towards the area. This creature's going to give them directions. They kind of stop the vehicle, and he says, okay, you're going to have to go, and you have to stay in the pocket because things are going to move very quickly, whatever. And they're like, okay, can we go now? And he says, wait, we have to wait until he says we're ready. It's a creature. It's a magical creature. We don't know where he's from or what. It's again, brings a little bit of levity to the situation. But anyways, they're basically waiting for this creature to say when they're able to go, because it's all about timing and whatnot. And I guess based on his magical creature, he has a feeling or a know-how in a sense.
He kind of knows when to turn. So they pretty much have to listen to the fake Mandarin who's listening to the creature on when to turn, how hard to turn, and like they have to follow 100%.
And they can't go too slow, and they can't go too fast. And so he always says, like, stay in the pocket. And he's like, okay, speed up, because the trees are getting close, and the brother and sister in the back freaking out like they're gonna die. Yeah. Long story short, they make it through literally by the sliver of like they just make it through.
It closes, and then they do
they break out,
the smash through the tree kind of thing. Typical action car thing.
And so they get there. They get to the area where the father and mother fought. They're looking for the entrance. And I can't remember how they open the entrance from here.
So they just have to drive through the waterfall. And then it kind of goes into a magical portal. And then they drive through. And then they're driving through beside all these creatures. They look like weird horses.
Like Harry Potter. Fantastic Beasts.
yeah. Like one thing looked like Ninetales from Pokemon.
Yes, that's the first thing I thought. This is a lone Ninetales. What's going on here? And then it's like, here's some horse creature. Okay, this looks different, but the first one definitely looked like a Pokemon. And I don't know if it was like, Asian culture and like that's recognizable. And I know with Japan, foxes are very held dear. Now, Shang-Chi is supposed to be Chinese based, not Japanese based. So I don't know if they also revere these kind of creatures or not, but it's very funny that they chose that kind of like fox mystical creature.
So I guess eventually they drive through, and then they find the village. There's these big two gigantic lion kind of things that are protectors and battle with them, and then there's a line of guards, male and female, in red with these kind of electric staff weapons,
both staff
things.
And so they come out, they have a conversation, and the elder is not really happy about them being there and doesn't really want them there. And then out steps their mother's sister, their aunt, basically, who says that they're family and that they belong and this and that. And so they're essentially welcome to the village.
Yeah.
And so he tells the story. He explains that his father's on the way. He wants to destroy everything, and we obviously don't want a part of it.
Yeah. And she asks, "Is he wearing the rings?" And Shang-Chi explains that he hasn't taken it off since their mother's death. And so the aunt goes into a story about how
because he says he's hearing the
voices, and they're protecting this evil pathway from creatures coming in that they had this whole battle in the past where the biggest warriors were sent, and they were only one when their magical dragon came up and even Oz and pushed them back in to their realm and sealed the pathway with special magical dragon scale fortress kind of door.
Yeah, so a lot of them died, and basically if they were the last defense on protecting the world, if these creatures got out, they basically absorb the souls of anyone and then feed the main mother beast, and then it gets bigger and stronger and bigger and stronger, and then it can basically destroy anything.
So it's calling out to anyone that's powerful and trying to give them their biggest wants and
their biggest desire. And so it knows the rings are strong. It knows that's the key to his escape, and so it's called out. So the aunt says other people have shown up here. Somehow they found a way into the village, and with the same thing, hearing people that are dead, and we've had to stop them.
Yeah.
And so they know that that's what's happening, and so Shang-Chi and stuff are there, and so they end up having to train and decide to defend the village.
Yeah.
And we see the sister get to train because she sees that the females and the males are training together here. Everything's like unity. And so, or equal rights, equal acceptance. And so they give her like cable with I can't remember the name of the weapon.
Spear at the end.
Yeah. And so she gets to practice in her little area. And then so the brother goes with the aunt to practice. And Katie is given a bunch of arrows and is told to and some bows to go hand them out. And then she ends target practicing, and she ends up learning how to use a bow and arrow.
Yeah.
So it's very funny because she has this. The leader doesn't want Katie there, or doesn't want any of them, but really doesn't like Katie because she's just a nobody.
Yeah.
And always talks down to her, but she gets better. You can see her progression. You get to see their training get better. They get special armor made out of the dragon scales, better weapons.
I guess before the mother passed, she said if the children ever come back, then she wanted these two garments made and their special armor with dragon scale armor.
That's right. And so Shang-Chi's is red and the sister's is black and white, which I thought was interesting, but we find out why those colors were chosen later on. And we see Shang-Chi practice with the aunt, he says, my mother's the only one who were able to stop my dad. Show me, teach me. And so they're fighting, and of course she's knocking him out and beating him up, and she says you carry both your father and your mother in you, and it's you can't have one without the other.
Yeah.
You have to
be yourself. You have to be yourself. Let in.
And she opens up his hands instead of fighting style aggressive to be more passive or whatever. And then so we start seeing memories of him training with his mother, and we see the story of what happened to his mother, and he's hurting and he's got to let it go. He's got to deal with what happened.
Yeah.
So we get the whole backstory about the father and the mother and all that stuff. And he had told Katie back on the bus before they went that he was sent here on a mission to kill someone, and he couldn't go through with it. Well, now when he faces the path, he ends up sitting down with Katie, and he says, I lied to you before. The truth is I did kill the guy.
Yeah.
And then I felt horrible about it. And so that's why I kind of ran away and stayed away from ever going back and not wanting to be a part of that life. And so he goes, and that's why I have to be what my father taught me. A killer, I have to kill my father. Yeah. And so Katie's kind of no, you don't have to do that. And he kind of walks away and feels this is my duty. I have to do this. This is who I am. This is who I'm meant to be. And so after fighting with the aunt, I guess he learned some of the techniques, I guess, we all the training and stuff, until we get to the point where the father's men and him say, okay, now's the time, let's head out. And we don't see the forest much situation. They just arrive. Yeah. They just get through it.
Yeah.
They make it. And a lot of them make it. How small that pocket was, a lot of those men made it through.
3 vehicles or 4 there's a lot of...
Yeah, they get through there. But they arrive, they're all standing on guard, and they're being told that they're not allowed to come in. And then the father sees his son and daughter there and says, are you going to join these people in defense? Stop
the ones that are holding your mother hostage.
Yeah, and so then they come out and said, you're not hearing your mother, you're hearing a beast, it's not true, and all this stuff, and you can't let it go, and blah, blah, blah. And he's this is foolishness, enough.
Yeah.
So the battle essentially starts. They fight, everything's going on, and so the father kind of sneaks through and is heading to, I guess, a shrine that they had made of a lot of their fallen warriors, one of which is of
With
mother.
the mother, yes, right.
So the father goes in, and after some crazy fight scenes between the sister and the brother and the lion dog and all this sorts of stuff, she's like, tells him, like, go after the father, I'll fight here. So Shang-Chi goes after him, and so they're in there to have a conversation with the mother being dead, and that the son's afraid of him, and, you know, he's not ready to have the rings, he's not good enough. And so the son says, I'm not afraid of you. And then they fight and have this cool fight scene, and of course, the father beats his son down a bit. Shang-Chi comes back, does some cool hits against him, but then ultimately he gets so mad at what's happening, and I guess he hears the voice.
Yeah, because he says, do you think if mom came back, she'd
never want to be with you? Because he beats him down at one point, and he's on the floor, and so then he summons all of his anger and uses the rings to blast his son right through the water down into, I guess, the depths of the lake.
Yeah.
And so the son's gone. He then blasts himself
Over
across
the lake
to start using the energy to start breaking through this wall.
That's right.
And so while this is happening, he's pounding the wall. Some of the scales start opening up, and some of these creatures come out. And as they come through, the ant's like, we have to work together to stop these things. And he's like, oh, we don't work with anybody. So they start fighting, and every time they cut and attack it, the thing just keeps respawning, or like cuts his head off and goes back. He stabs him. It's like smoke. Like he can't do any damage to it.
Only their weapons can damage them.
That's right. And so then when he sees the lady or whatever hit it with a stick and it kills it, he goes, okay, yeah, maybe we should
work together.
So then they all like stop fighting, and then now these slowly but surely more and more of these like dragon bat creatures come out and are literally grabbing people and sucking the souls out, and are going back into the door. And so the father's oblivious to this. And so the guy with the arm builds like a dragon sword somehow, and they all just get weapons, and then the fight starts happening, and they're all like, we gotta get to our father, we gotta stop him from what he's doing. And I think one of them asks, like, where's Shang-Chi, right?
Yeah. So Katie asked that to the sister, and she said, I thought you would know. And that's when it kind of cuts to Shang-Chi floating at the bottom, and then some air, he kind of turns and some air bubbles come and kind of sucked into him so he's not drowning. And then we see this dragon come up
out of the water, pull him up to the surface, and now it's very like Raya and the Last Dragon. We got some Chinese water dragon, very snake-like serpentines, you know, flying around, very
knocking
long.
down a lot of the little minions that are coming out, the bat-like creatures that are coming to attack the town and the armies, the two armies that have joined together.
That's right. And the scales of the dragon and the power of the dragon is all true. It all comes from this beast that I guess they were protecting or honoring. And so Shang-Chi comes back, and he's riding on the dragon, and he remembers things about his mother and like being himself and all this kind of stuff. And so they're flying around doing some damage. He then goes and faces the father on the door and is telling him he has to stop, what he's doing is wrong. So they do this another fight. And as they fight, he, I guess, kind of remembers and starts doing the stuff that his mother and his aunt taught him. And then as the rings are attacking him, he's then taking control of them, and they're spinning around him. He starts using the rings against them.
So all of a sudden, his dad has 5, and he has 5 of the rings.
And they start using them against each other.
Like whips kind of thing.
Yes, but he doesn't have them on him. They're just working with the wind, whereas the father is actually shooting them and coming back. And Shang-Chi's are all yellow, and the father's are all blue. Almost to show, I guess, light and dark or something like that. And so they're fighting, and then eventually it gets to the point where as the father shoots them, he slowly starts losing more and more until the father has no more rings, and the son has all of them.
Yeah.
And then he starts using them, and he creates this huge
kind of ball, like
energy ball.
Energy ball that he was going to
Dragon Ball Z.
yeah, it kind of looked like that.
Blasts him, and
but he ends up throwing it down.
That's right. He was going to blast them, and then he doesn't, and it's like, I don't need these rings. Like I was able to stop you, and I don't need the power. Like that's not what it's about, kind of thing. This is not who I am. And then the father realizes that he was wrong and in his ways.
Well, he hears the calling again, and all of a sudden the door breaks open. And this big creature comes and is still saying the words from the mother. So he realizes, I was duped.
Yep.
And then the creature kind of wraps around him and starts
he grabs the rings. And he grabs the rings, and he's, I guess, at one point he tries to use it, but to no avail. And so his son sees him getting sucked up, and he looks at his son. And he just is like, I don't even think he says words. No, he just shoots the rings to his son like, it's yours now.
Yeah.
Do the right thing by your mother or whatever. And so he gets his soul absorbed, and he's a very powerful being at this point. So the beast gets stronger, and then the dragon and the beast start fighting. Shang-Chi jumps on the dragon's back, and the sister jumps on the dragon's back. They're riding around, they're trying to kill these beasts, and then they're fighting. And all the people are there trying to do their best, but a lot of them are dying. And then they see as the dragon and has him enveloped, and he gets water, I guess, around the beast. The little guys drop all these souls into its mouth, and it gets bigger and stronger, and then it's able to break free, and it grabs the dragon's mouth and is trying to suck the dragon soul out. And then the people are like, if it gets the dragon soul, it'll be unstoppable.
That's right.
So the dragon is slowly losing.
There's these purple lines on the creature's neck, where if they shoot one, a few of the arrows or one arrow, it will, take the, what would you call it, like the beast out.
Yeah, it looked like a bat to me, but it was yeah. So Katie's the one that has the shot. She takes the shot and she hits it right in the throat, knocks it back. It drops the ability to suck the soul out, goes back into the dragon. The dragon gets a second wind and starts destroying it. And so
and then Shang-Chi kind of puts the rings inside
into its mouth. It jumps towards it, shoots rings inside of its mouth, and then starts using its power to start drawing it out from its stomach, and then it just blows out of its stomach. Yeah. All the while, the sister was using her thing to like cut the tendrils to try to free the dragon. Oh no! It had stuff on the dragon's eye. Right, it had a bunch of them on the dragon's eye, and it freed the dragon by using its thing. And so, it realized like, oh, this is the sister, so it allowed it to fly on its back as well. And so they were trying to fight this bat. As they're free falling, Shang-Chi is using his powers to pull the rings out. It destroys the bat. The dragon, it lands on the dragon, right? No, as he falls, he doesn't land in the water, does he?
I think he lands in the water.
Does he?
Yeah.
Okay. Anyways, but they get back, they win. The dragon's there, they're all cheering, whatever, but they lost a lot of lives, including the elder. He died.
That's right.
Next to Katie. And so they stopped the evil. They realized, what had happened, and they kind of had to put the matters behind them. So they all light lanterns to set the souls free of their ancestors.
They did reseal the door as well.
Yes, they did. But the big beast is dead, though, right? So I guess whatever little creatures are left, they resealed the door, and that was like the big battle, the big scene. So the big dragon's alive, it's living there. Shang-Chi kind of arrives at the end with the rings, and they all see he is the true guardian or whatever. Yeah. And so him and his sister are there, and so they're all accepted into the village. And they do the burial scene. They all let lanterns go for the dead. The one lets one go for the mother. One lets one go for the father, or the Shang-Chi and Yuriko. And they do that thing. And then we kind of cut through to them,
our scene
of them telling the story of Katie and Shang-Chi telling the story to one of their close friends on a double date kind of thing.
Yeah, and her husband. So earlier in the movie, they do a scene similar to this where their best friend is telling Shang-Chi and Katie that, it's time to grow up.
Settle down.
They were telling stories about their past, of how they, stole a car or whatever and did these wild things, joyrides. And it's time to settle down. And, they both have degrees and they're both so smart. Shang-Chi can speak 4 languages, so on and so forth, and they have more potential. So now they've come back and they're telling this story about, how Katie shot this arrow and Sean was, doing this magical thing with these rings that and then she kind of at the end of the story is like, okay, haha, you're getting back to me for all the things I said to you.
This is ridiculous. And it's and you saved the world. And then behind them, we see the Doctor Strange ring open up, and Wong comes through, and they're all like, look behind you. And Wong comes out. He's
calling Shang-Chi. Shang-Chi's looking around.
Yeah. And he's like, come to me. And then doesn't he take their drink?
Yeah. He takes the friend's drink and drinks it. He's like...
Yeah,
and you too, Katie, you got to come too. So they're like, oh, I guess we better go. And so they go into this portal, and everyone's in the bar just staring at them. And,
and they're kind of like,
she's like, I'll call you and I'll text you and catch up. So now we're brought into, this is the after cut, right?
No, so that's how it ends. They kind of go off, and that's the end.
The best friend asks, where's your sister? And he goes, oh, she's back at my father's compound. Cleaning it all up and dismantling it.
And that's all we hear. And so then the movie kind of ends with that. We get the first credit scene, and then we get the first post credit scene, which is the fake credits. We get the Wong and the ring. He basically has the rings. He says, you have the rings, and he's analyzing it, and he says these are really old. They're ancient.
Database.
Yeah, they're from this. Would you get them? They have this ancient power. They're calling to something, and they look, and so they have Captain Marvel and Bruce Banner there because they're smart. And Ms. Marvel goes all around space, so she's seen all sorts of alien technologies, and Bruce Banner's very smart if they can figure out what's going on here. And so they realize that it's calling to something. They don't know what it is. They know it's very old, very ancient. So I'm thinking right away, Eternals. This is connecting somehow to the Eternals, maybe the power of the rings is calling to the big bad that's going to be in Eternals, or this could be setting up Galactus.
Yeah.
Like there's so many things that they could be setting up with this particular, like it's calling to someone of this power. We don't know, but it is ancient. The Eternals are ancient. So I think it's going to be a direct connect to that because that's the next movie, right? We have Eternals.
It is the next movie. Now I'm not sure if Eternals connect to Shang-Chi at all, or...
Well, I mean, it might just be like they talk about ancient and old powers, and maybe at the end of this movie, it'll connect to this ending and kind of bring it forward. We'll have to wait and see.
Yeah. So they didn't explain what, but I thought it was interesting. Captain Marvel is all of a sudden, she's like, it's not alien tech that I've ever seen.
And she's like, oh, I got something to go.
And
I gotta
she's
go.
like, get my number from Bruce. And then she kind of takes off.
Yeah.
And Bruce is like, I don't have her number. Like she always does this kind of thing. She just takes off.
And he has his arm in a cast from the snap. He's still injured.
But it looks like he's lost his power or ability, or he thinks he's lost it. Yeah. Because at the end, I don't think he ever turns into Hulk again after this.
He doesn't, but remember in Endgame, he was the Hulk and he was himself. Like he was like both. He was the Hulk, but he was like smart and he was able to talk.
Yeah.
So now that he's reverted back, you're right.
But then he went into the Hulkbuster, right? Did he ever turn back into the Hulk after being
that was Infinity War? He was in Hulkbuster. In the final Endgame, he was Hulk.
Okay. Yeah.
Remember he did the snap and then he fought at the end and then his arm was in a sling and he was Bruce. So, but in Endgame, when we first meet up with him, he was in the cafe. He was Green Hulk, but he was himself. It was He figured out a way to be both. And so we thought, okay, he's Hulk forever now. But then now we see he's Bruce. So yeah, we don't know what's going on.
So like in the comics for She-Hulk, I think it's his cousin that becomes She-Hulk and she's a lawyer. So I think she has an accident or something, and in the comic, Bruce thinks he doesn't have the power, so he gives a blood fusion, and then it ends up that she still has the gamma in him, so she turns into She-Hulk. So I wonder if that's how they're trying to get the She-Hulk character into
then is he going to be back? I'm sure Hulk will be back.
And if she's a lawyer, like, is she going to work with the captain to try and get the Abomination out because he wants them all under his control? Like, he's trying to get the Hulk so that he can get his blood to create more super soldiers, and he's the one that created Abomination. By giving them the injections.
And it was wrong. It wasn't the right.
So I wonder, like, she's gonna work for the Corporal to try and get the people that he wants on his team out, and then she becomes She-Hulk. So it could turn into a pathway for She-Hulk in a way, with Wong maybe helping, or this is the introduction to Abomination because he'll be in She-Hulk. Obviously, they've announced that, but. In what capacity will he be there?
Yeah, and then the final post-credit scenes, we catch up with a sister who is not only at her father's compound, but she's basically taken over as leader and ruler of the Ten Rings, and she's talking about making the Ten Rings good again. It has the flag behind her, and she's sitting in the throne room.
Graffiti, music, and it's both male and female training.
Yes, because she's the leader, but yeah, she's the leader. She's sitting on the throne, so is she going to be a big bad? Is she going to make this Ten Rings organization good? We have wait to see, because she did join up with her brother. She did stop her father. She could still have harboring feelings about him taking the rings, and maybe she wants it for herself. Yeah. We'll have to wait and see, but we will see more of them. In fact, it does say the Ten Rings will return.
Yeah.
In some sort of new. So will it be a Shang-Chi 2? Will it be part of a team-up movie? We don't know, but we know.
Is the Shang-Chi army going to be, or the Ten Ring army going to be
in a show?
New bad, like the new kind of. It'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see.
New Hydra kind of underground kind of thing that controls, because in the beginning it says the Ten Rings would cripple governments and take down banks and different factions and things like that. So the Ten Rings were always an organization that were bad and kind of evil mafia kind of style organization, Yakuza kind of style. But will they be good or bad under the sister's guidance? It'll be interesting.
And now that he has the rings and he's wearing them, and again, they're bracelets, not rings. They call them the rings, but they are bracelets. In the comic, they are rings that go on the fingers, and they all have different powers and abilities. And when Shang-Chi uses it with the wind, they don't do anything really different other than him creating that fireball out of all of them. There was really nothing different about them other than them all just being magical rings. So I thought that was a little bit of a letdown. I'm hoping that there definitely will be a sequel. They're not going to leave it at one and done.
Yeah.
And so will the sequel focus on the Ten Rings? Will there be an after credit scene with Eternals? where he meets up with them and they talk about technology and they unlock or explain how they all have different powers, and then part 2 is about him understanding them.
Yeah.
That's what we're gonna have to find out and wait and see if we are gonna get the true 10 rings and understand how they are supposed to be. Maybe once they figure them out, they shrink down to rings. We don't know.
So I thought when Shang-Chi took over them, they would convert into rings for him, and because he knew the different elements and things that they would turn into
light and darkness,
all those individual elements, but unfortunately we didn't see that. But we're hoping in some sort of post-credit, as Mike said, or another movie, that it does go more towards that way, instead of just having these 10 rings, 5 on each arm, that are just kind of extensions of your arms and kind of blasts and things like that. So it's kind of anticlimactic in that way for the 10 rings that are supposed to be so powerful and have so many different elements, where it's just kind of 2 or 3 moves that it could do and be used for. And although they're powerful, they're not anything more special than Iron Man's blasters,
Shuri's blasters,
like different things like that. So
yeah, so I guess they didn't want them to make them seem like Infinity Stones and they were like the ultimate power, because they are supposed to have a lot of power, and the one who has all 10 can do limitless things. Yeah. But I guess they didn't want it to be bigger than what the Infinity Stones were, because that was like the big bad, and to have another, now all of a sudden there's these 10 rings this person had this whole time. And again, we didn't find out where he was, why he wasn't part of the Thanos fight. Was he snapped into oblivion? If he was, didn't someone else find the rings? Like, there was none of that, and maybe we'll get more answers in the future, or maybe they're just going to just move on without it and not worry about it. But it was an interesting situation. So I thought going forward, hopefully we get some more answers and some more light on the rings and their abilities. If they literally just leave them as this, that's a disappointment, but I guess it kind of brings us forward into wherever we're going to go.
Yep, definitely. So overall, enjoyable movie. Some differences from the comic, but they do that with all the movies that they've done, which is fine. You can't make it the same. You gotta do liberties and do it your own. So okay with that, but a little disappointed by the rings. But acting was good. The comedy was sprinkled in there nicely. So I thought that was great. The characters seemed to fit. So yeah, it was nice to see.
I thought we were gonna see Fin Fang Foom as the big bad.
So I think that might be who they're
building up to.
The beacon is for maybe that kind of.
But where's he been? Is he
off world? A dragon type race where maybe they've been searching for it in different planets and just haven't realized that it's on Earth, and this is the beacon that will call them all forward, and they'll have a big battle in Shang-Chi 2, or maybe a different movie to bring them in and kind of have a team up that way. But we'll have to see.
Yeah, we'll have to see. And like I said, we might have some answers in Eternals. We'll have to wait and see, as we're getting, again, an origin story. But they do talk about Thanos. They do talk about events that have happened.
Avengers and everything like that, yeah.
It'll be interesting to see how this connects. And I'm sure it is part of this phase for a reason. So there has to be some connective tissue. If it's not to Shang-Chi, maybe it'll be to Doctor Strange.
Yeah.
But either way, we're going to see some more connective tissue, especially in the post-credit scenes with the next few movies. So you're going to see us do a Venom review at some point. Eternals, and of course, the big Spider-Man.
We can't wait for that. Which, Doctor Strange is in that, and Wang. So it'll be interesting to see if we get more information there.
Absolutely. So there you have it, folks. That's our thoughts on Shang-Chi. We liked the movie. We enjoyed it. Definitely, we recommend you see it in the theater. It could have been a little bit better in regards to how they dealt with the rings, for my opinion. Yeah. However, let us know what you thought. Drop a comment below, like the video, click subscribe if you'd like to support us. And as always, friends, stay nerdy.